Namaste, friends, and welcome back to the podcast. This week's episode is going to be a little bit different, and I'm going to be honest, it's a little bit sticky for me. I am going to talk to you this week about the work that I do and why I am so passionate about it. I never want this podcast to feel salesy or pitchy. That's something I'm super uncomfortable with, which is why it's taking a lot of courage for me to do this episode today. But I am very, very passionate about my work. I personally have experienced the transformative power of this work. I've witnessed so many other women experience the transformation, and I know it is what I am here to do. I believe it is my sacred duty or calling to do this work. And I believe that sometimes when we're in what we call our dharma, our highest truth, our sacred duty, our soul's purpose, we have to sometimes get uncomfortable. And it's in service to the people that we serve. And so here I am getting super uncomfortable and talking to you about my coaching strategy, my pathway, what I do with my clients, so that you can have a better understanding of what it is I do, how I do it, and the transformation that occurs from this work. And I am not only passionate about this work because I know it transforms the individual. I am passionate about it because when the individual is transformed, they transform everything in their orbit, their relationships, their communities, their work, their parenting, and it has such a huge ripple effect. So today I am going to walk you through my client journey so that you hopefully have a better understanding of exactly what it is I do and how I do it. And if this feels resonant for you, then we can work together, or you can share this episode with someone who you think could really benefit from this work. So let's start with who this work is for. This work is for midlife women who feel disconnected from themselves. So what does that mean? Maybe you feel disconnected from your body. Maybe it's from your intuition. Maybe you feel like you just don't know what you want at this phase of life. You're disconnected from your desires. Maybe you feel like your life just doesn't represent who you are, right? There's a disconnection between the truth of who you are on the inside and what your life looks like on the outside, or what you spend most of your time doing, right? There's a disconnection between what I really want to be doing and what I actually am doing. Maybe there is a disconnection from purpose. You feel like you are going through the motions every day. You go to work, you take care of the house, maybe you're still parenting, and yet you just feel like you're not really living your purpose, or that your life lacks the depth of meaning that you would like it to have. Maybe you feel disconnected in your relationships, whether it be your partnership or friendships. It just feels like something is off. Like there's just not that it's not aligning like a puzzle piece like it once did. There's so many ways that we can become disconnected from ourselves. And that is who my work is for. Midlife women who are experiencing that sense of disconnection. And it can show up as feeling anxious or overwhelmed, or asking questions like, who am I? What do I want? What's next for me? And a lot of times in this phase, we don't know what we want, right? That's the problem. We know that we're unsatisfied, we're unfulfilled, we are anxious or overwhelmed, but we don't have an answer as to what would solve that problem. And the reason why we don't have an answer is because we are disconnected from our inner selves. And so the work I do, I say it's coming home to yourself. That's what I help women do, come home to themselves. And that's what that means, that phrase, coming home to yourself. It means coming home to the inner knowing, coming home to self-trust, coming home to your intuition, coming home to your deepest truth, to your essence, to your purpose, and living in alignment with those things. So not only do you reconnect with them, you can hear them, you know them, you feel them, you understand them, but you actually your life actually reflects them, right? What you do on a daily basis actually reflects that deepest truth. And if you feel like, yes, like you're speaking my language, Katie, I don't know what I want. I don't really know who I am. I am living from the neck up. I am not embodied. I have no idea what my purpose is or my passions are or what I want out of this phase of life. I want you to take a deep breath and hear me when I say that this is normal. This is the normal arc of life. Midlife is meant to be a transformation. It is meant to be a coming home to ourselves. It is meant to be the time where we stop carrying all the things that aren't ours. Because when I say coming home to yourself, I'm not saying transform who you are. I'm saying be who you are. That's all I am asking. That's all I'm inviting is for you to actually be who you are, which requires that you shed anything that is not you. In yoga philosophy, we call them the veils. And I'm sure you've heard in many wisdom traditions, they talk about the inner light, right? Your inner light. That's who you are, the essence of who you are, your soul. We can call it many different things. But in this visual of the veils, we all have an inner light that we come into this body with, we come into this life with. And over time, through the course of our lives, these veils get placed on top of our inner light, and they come from parents and culture and friends and teachers and life experiences and partners and kids and all the things that we accumulate over life. And little by little by little, that light seems to get dimmer and dimmer and dimmer until sometimes it seems to almost as if it has disappeared. But your light, your essence, is still there, and it is shining as brightly as when it was first placed into this body, this physical body that you have. What is needed to see it again is to remove the veils, to take them off. Each veil that is removed, you get to see, oh, there's my light. It's shining a little bit brighter and a little bit brighter. And so that's what we do. In the journey, this coaching journey that I take you on, it's the removal of these veils and the reconnection with that light that has always been there. It's never left you, and it never will, and it will, in my belief, go on with you to the next place you go after you leave this earthly experience. So how do we do that? How do we come home to ourselves, begin to, learn to hear ourselves and trust ourselves and connect with ourselves? I call it the inner alignment journey. So that's what it's called. And it's a pathway of learning to re-listen, to see clearly, to trust, to act in alignment, and to heal, right? Because this is a healing journey. What I'm taking you through is not just shifting your mindset or learning new habits or new taking on more. It's really about healing what needs to be healed so that that light can shine. So first part is that learning to listen, being able to get still and quiet enough that you can start to hear that inner voice. It's quiet, it's subtle, and it requires us to go inward and pay attention, listening to what our body needs, what our intuition is speaking, to what our emotions are trying to show us. This is the first part, just learning how to listen. Once you learn how to listen, then we move on to seeing clearly. And this is, and as you know, the map that I use is based on yoga philosophy as a yoga teacher. And this second part, this seeing clearly, is a lot of what yoga is about. Yoga is what's called embodied wisdom, which means that we learn, right? There's knowledge, and we learn how to apply the knowledge in a wise way, and we learn how to discern what is deeply true for us, but we do it in an embodied way, which means that it's not just something that we know in our minds, it's something that we feel throughout our entire bodies as truth. So this phase 2 part about learning to see clearly, this is where we learn to see the things that maybe have been running our lives unconsciously, like limiting beliefs, like thought patterns or stories. We learn how to understand that though we may play various roles in our lives, really important roles like mothers and partners and daughters and friends and whatever our job title is, these are all wonderful, important roles that I hope you fully embody, but they are not who you are, right? And so sometimes when we've been playing certain roles for a really long time, we start to believe that's who we are and that we have to act as if we were always in one of those roles, when the truth of who we are is so much deeper than that. So when we start to see clearly, we start to shed thoughts, patterns, beliefs that are holding us back, that we've absorbed from culture, from family, from people around us, from religion, even from our own success, right? The things that we have succeeded at or our own failures. And we get to see clearly, and it's freedom, really. Quite honestly, this is where freedom comes in, because we start to understand deeply in an embodied way, understand, wait, I don't have to be the good girl. I don't have to always be nice. I don't have to be the one that holds everything together. I don't have to not get angry, right? I'm allowed actually to get really pissed off. I get to have desires, and not only just have the desires, fulfill them, right? Do what I need to do, fulfill the desires. I don't always have to put myself last on the list, right? This is where freedom comes in. So once we learn to listen inward, connect with our desires, our bodies, our intuition, our deepest truths, then we can start to see clearly, right? We can start to see clearly not only what it is that is true for us, but what we're doing that is keeping us out of alignment with what is true for us. Okay, so first we listen, then we get to see clearly. Then we start learning how to trust ourselves again, because there is a gap there, right? Maybe we can hear what we deeply desire on many different levels. And maybe we see the patterns that are keeping us out of alignment from those truths. But maybe it's still hard to actually live it, right? There's this lack of trust, because if for many years you've been living out of alignment, and you haven't been listening to those inner whispers, and you haven't been living that deeper truth, then you haven't built the muscle. It's equivalent to, building your muscles at the gym. Little by little, this requires small baby steps to build the muscle of trust. And maybe you've done something in your life that, you can equate this to. Like, for example, I think about, as a yoga teacher, I always come back to yoga, but maybe there's a certain balancing posture. And at first, you couldn't lift your one leg off the ground. You just maybe were keeping a toe down. And then maybe you could lift the leg just a little bit more, and maybe a little bit more, and maybe a little bit more until eventually you were standing on one leg, right? You had to build not only the muscle, the strength in the standing leg to be able to do that, but you also had to build the trust in yourself because balancing requires that you trust that you're not going to fall flat on your face. And so there's two things, right? You're building the muscle, and along with it, you're building the trust. And so this third phase of the journey is that learning to do that, taking tiny, small steps toward what it is that feels out of alignment for you, and learning to follow the whispers without worrying about what other people think or disappointing other people or feeling guilty about it. Um, and maybe at first you are still worried about what other people think, but you do it anyway, right? Maybe you are still scared that you're going to disappoint someone, or it's going to be really uncomfortable, but you do it anyway. Here I am being really uncomfortable, right? And yet doing it anyway because this is in alignment with my deepest truth. And so I I know that this episode is what I need it to do, even though it's making me super cringy and uncomfortable, right? You don't always have to, it doesn't always have to be comfortable, right? We can be afraid of judgment and criticism and disappointment, um, and still do it anyway. And that is really what builds that self-trust, because the deepest part of you knew that it was right and you listened, right? You didn't let anything stop you from listening. And so that self-trust muscle is the third part of the journey, and it's built one small act at a time. Okay, so we've learned to listen, we've learned to see clearly, and we've learned to not only listen, but trust what we're hearing. And we've learned to take aligned action. The last part of this journey is about healing through life's challenges. And I think this is a really, really important part of this journey because for most people, you haven't reached midlife without having gone through some pretty difficult things. By now, many of you probably went through several really difficult things, starting in childhood, moving through, all the way up through your teenage years and young adult and um, into your 30s and 40s. Life can get pretty heavy. And this last phase of the journey together is about honoring that. It's about honoring the grief you may still be carrying, the pain, the loss, the resentment, honoring the fear and the anger that may still be living inside of you that you haven't fully processed and released. And I am so passionate about this part of this journey because we can't fully come into alignment if we're still carrying those things with us. And it doesn't mean that we say that the things that happened were okay or that we're glad that they happened. What it means is that we can face them, process them, release them from our bodies, and be able to use them for growth. Because when we learn to hold our difficult emotions with compassion, to release them from our bodies, to soften our resistance against them, we can start making meaning out of what we lived through. This is where pain becomes wisdom, and that wisdom can turn into purpose. It can turn into service. I wouldn't be here with you today had I not gone through the difficult challenges of my life and transformed that pain into purpose. And so this last part of this journey, I am so passionate about, because life is always going to be handing us something that we wish it wouldn't, right? Whether that be something in our personal lives, something in the world, something happening to someone we care about. This is the journey of life, is that there at all times are going to be challenges. And some are big challenges, dark night of the soul experiences, and some are on the smaller side, but they're still painful. They still hurt, ambiguous grief. I have an episode on that I'll link in the show notes, but these are the small losses, like maybe when your child goes off to college, right? And you're no longer parenting them every day, or maybe you retired and that's a loss. That's a loss of a role that you maybe was very meaningful to you that you are no longer embodying. There's so many of these small losses that we grieve. But how do we make meaning out of them? How do we not allow the suffering to be wasted? Wasted suffering is suffering that we go through and we never learn anything from it. We don't grow. We don't use it to help ourselves or help someone else. That's wasted suffering. Use your suffering as fuel. Fuel for growth, fuel for service, fuel for alignment. And what I want to say about this whole journey that I walk my clients through is that by the end, you no longer need me. Because once you learn to reconnect with yourself, once you can hear the thoughts and the whispers and the intuition and once you're embodied, right? You can feel the body and sense into the body and know what it's trying to tell you. Once you've developed that deep sense of trust, I deeply trust myself, and I don't need to look for answers outside of me because everything I need is within me. Once you learn how to turn inward with that trust, see the patterns that are keeping you stuck. Once you learn how to build the muscle of taking aligned action, and you can transform your suffering into good, you don't need me. Everything that comes after that, and it will come because this is an ongoing practice, right? Staying connected to ourselves is to all parts of ourselves, right? To our body, to our intuition, to our desires, to our purpose, is an ongoing, never-ending practice. But once you learn the practice, you can apply it without me, right? So again, I am just on this journey with you to help you to light the journey, to hold up the lantern. And then we come to a point where you've removed all of those veils. You don't need my lantern because your light is shining very, very brightly. And that is what I want for you. I want you to have all the skills and practices that you need to keep yourself deeply connected to the truth of who you are, and have the trust in yourself to not only know that truth, but to actually live it. So that is my 5-step journey that I take clients through. So if this episode resonated with you, if you found your head nodding up and down to the things I was saying, or you just really felt a recognition in your heart, I would love to invite you to do this work with me. And there are many pathways in. You can sign up for my newsletter on Substack, where I write about these things. You can participate in the short practices that I also have up on Substack called Returning Home to Yourself. Or you can schedule a clarity call. If you're ready for that deeper support, you're ready to walk this journey, then you can sign up for a clarity call and we can talk more about what this journey would look like for you specifically. I thank you so much for being here. I thank you for listening. And most of all, I thank you for being willing to come home to yourself. Namaste, friends. Have a beautiful week ahead.